Welcome to Channel I Make, your insight to the Australian visa system. Good day everyone, my name is Carl Young, your online YouTube visa consultant. Are you interested in migrating to Australia? Why don't you consider to subscribe to my channel and turn on the bell on the side so once we have all the updates and news, you'll be the first one getting all the insight. Now we will continue on in regards to the topic of employment sponsor visa. Now I have received some query and comment in regards now what would happen and what should be done if you have changed jobs or changed employer during a visa holding of 482 visa. It's a commonly circumstances and situation where a lot of people come to Australia and work for a particular employer, and in the duration of working either 1 year, 2 years, some people are working for 10 years, they're changing employer from one to another. So what should you do and what should be done in a way to in order to actually get that, to meet that lawfulness of your visa status, so you don't get unlawful, you don't breach your visa and get cancelled. Well, obviously there have been people being like that, and in this channel we don't want you to be like that. So anyway, let's explain. Now luckily that we do have enough information on the Home Affairs website, and I also talked about what the changes coming up in 2024, which is favorable for the visa holder of subclass 4A2. Okay, now first of all, let's go into immigration's website. Now as you can see, you may just want to Google this. Your job situation has changed, and you should be able to land yourself in this web page within the Department of Home Affairs. Now, I've selected that your visa is subclass 4A2. So again, it's directly information for all the visa 4A2 visa holders. Now, what are the circumstances that your job may have changed? Let's just give you some scenario. First of all, is that you may identify a new opportunity. The occupation stays the same. You're still a chef, you're still a cook, or you're still an IT manager, you're still a software engineer, you're still a whichever the profession that you are, and you have found a better offer from an Australian employer. That's one way that your situation may have changed. And the other thing is not you, it's the employer. Now the employer may have sold their business to another employer. Obviously then your sponsor's ID has changed, because there's although it may still be the same business, for example the restaurant's still there, you still work for the same restaurant, but the ownership of that restaurant has changed. Now that will also cause the situation as what you have seen, your job situation has changed. So what can be done and what should be done? So let's have a read. So we will primarily focus on that you are the primary visa holder. We will just not going to talk about if you're a secondary visa holder. That means you're a spouse or kids. So usually we'll follow with what the primary visa holder's situation is. Okay, now let's have read. As the primary visa holder, you want to do a different job occupation whilst you hold the valid 4A2 visa. That's basically you changing your job. So your employer must submit a new nomination. You must apply for a new visa, and you must approve the nomination. You also must have that be granted into the new role. So basically, if you want to change jobs, you need to get a new nomination, and you must apply for a new visa as well. But the other situation is the second one: change employer while you still hold a valid visa. So your employer must submit a new nomination. We must approve the nomination before you start working for the new employer. So not much. The differences between the first scenario or the second is that the first one requires you to lodge a new visa. So if you dump the old job, you found a new offer, you go into a new employer, everything's new, you gotta get the new sponsorship, get this nomination, and get the visa done. Now, if the other situation is where that you're still working in the same business, but the entity of the ownership have to change. The only thing required to be done is the sponsor side, not you. You don't need to do anything there. Okay. Now going back here, if you stop working for the sponsor, you must take one of these action within 60 days. So we've learned from the 25th of November 2023. We were going to have a look at that information there. They're gonna bump it up, and migration strategy, they're gonna bump it up to about 90 days. So you got more time to find a new employer and be granted a different visa, or you might leave the country. So let's talk about the so basically, let's summarize that. If you want to change your situation, if you got dumped, the employers no longer want you, you got 60 days. That's current law, and the upcoming for this year's implementation of new policy, you got 90 days to find a new employer. Okay, and once you find a new employer, what do? The new employer need to get a sponsorship, nomination, and you need to lodge the new visa for 482. Now, if the other scenario is the employer has changed ownership and the business is still there, all you need to do is, not you, I mean the sponsor need to do another nomination. That's it. That's purely it. Now, what's going to happen in this year 2024 if we refer back to the migration strategy? The beauty of this, now let's talk about the disadvantage of the current situation. The disadvantage of the current situation is basically set it here. So it's restricted pathway to permanent residence. The visa holder is in short-term stream do not have a pathway. Now that's no longer valid anymore, and only period of employment with the nominating employer can count towards permanent residence. Now what does that mean? That means, for example, for the current policy, if you change the employer, means change the nomination, whichever the way, a new business, new offer, or the business stay the same but change ownership. Now the current policy or regulation, you will then, if you want to access the TRT, the temporary resident transition pathway, you're required to recount that 2 years of employment again. So it's not fair, it's unfair, it's unjust for the visa holders. So what they have approached, which I believe it will be a very good way, is that the new migration strategy looking towards to implement this so-called the skills in demand visa, whereby they can count the period of employment with the approved employer. So as long as the employer is approved, well, usually they need to apply to become what? My previous video talked about, they need to become a standard business sponsor. That means an approved employer. Okay, so the period of employment with any approved employer, the key here is any approved employer count towards permanent residence requirements. That basically meant you could basically accrue all your work experiences from one employer. Well, obviously that's the old law. Accrue through 2 employer, 3 or 4 or 5 or even 10. So if you want, you can accrue the 24-month work experiences with perhaps 24 employer. If you have 24 employer to actually change within 2 years, up to you. You can accrue all that together, and you can lodge the TRT transition to become a permanent residence afterward. Now that is the beauty. Now, question you may come is, when would that happen? So let's jump into the migration strategy action plan, and if we look at the skills in demand visa, which is a new commitment, as you can see here, for a clear pathway and mobility and clear pathway permanent residence, it will be implemented in late 2024. So not immediately, but luckily we are already in 2024, so we're looking towards to have that by the end of this year. So the beauty of this is that you can accrue all the work experiences with different employer or any approved employer, no longer required to stay with one employer, accrue 2 or 3 years, which is again unfair and unjust for the visa holders. Anyway, should you have more questions, query, more than welcome to leave comment right down below. Let's see you next video. Goodbye.